Welcome back to Books with Duddy. We are back with another spoiler-free book review today. And today we are doing Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King. So this is actually the first Stephen King book I've ever read. And it's kind of an interesting choice because I think he's known as, the king of horror. But this is more of a mystery / mostly thriller type book. But it looked interesting, and I definitely want to read more Stephen King in the future. So Mr. Mercedes is about a retired detective named Bill Hodges who, prior to his retiring, was working on a case but never was able to solve it. This case was where someone had driven a Mercedes into a crowd of people at a job fair, killing, I believe, 8 people, injuring a lot more, and he got away with it. The killer got away with it. And it goes unsolved. Bill Hodges retires until he receives a letter from the killer basically taunting him that he got away. And it becomes a cat and mouse game between Hodges and the killer. And that sets the stage for our book. Now, I would classify Mr. Mercedes as a thriller, not really a mystery, where a lot of times these types of books rely on, a mystery or a twist or, the killer being unknown. That's not necessarily the case in this book. I mean, there are some mysteries and some twists and things like that happen. But one of the things that I like about this book is that we get a perspective from the killer often. So we're switching back perspectives between Hodges and the killer throughout the book. And because of that, there's a constant sense of tension. We see the killer, how they're thinking, what they're planning, what they want to do, what their life is like, and all of those things. And it just leads to, like I said, tension throughout the book. And I like that this book was dark. I haven't read a lot of these types of books or even horror books, which I'm getting more into now, but this book was dark. The villain I found to be fascinating. They were depraved, psychotic, and there was really nothing off limits as far as what Stephen King was willing to have the killer do. Meaning there was definitely some taboo subjects and things like that I think a lot of times might just be either very lightly implied or just skipped altogether. But those subjects really drove home how depraved this person was. In my spoiler-free reviews, I don't generally touch on the characters too much because I just think that it's very hard to go deep into characters without it being spoilery. But I will say with Detective Hodges, he was a likable protagonist. There were times when I'm pulling out my hair saying, why are you doing this? This is so stupid, just a bad decision. But if you're looking at it from his point of view, you could see why he was doing what he was doing. I don't think he was an overly special protagonist, but he was fine. And I already kind of touched on the killer a little bit. He was a complete Fruit Loop, psychotic, and just kind of going through his daily life was very interesting. And I'm just going to touch on, one of the side characters real quick that comes into the book very early, Jerome, who basically works for Detective Hodges. And I thought Jerome was a really cool side character. He's a young kid, but he's super smart, and he's humorous, sometimes uncomfortably so. But I thought he was a really good side character. So, what did I like about this book? Well, number one, talked about it already. I liked the villain. Extremely psychotic, and getting to see their twisted inner thoughts. There was a time or two where I almost felt pity for the villain, just because of how messed up they were, messed up their life was. But those feelings quickly would go away when they were planning or reminiscing on their killings. So, but a very interesting character. And I like that the book didn't necessarily rely on just one big twist. I mean, as I said before, there was certainly twists, but it wasn't like so many books where it just relies on this one big twist to make the whole book happen. There was a very real cat and mouse game going on throughout the book of, are they going to stop this next plan before it happens? And I touch on Jerome as a supporting character. There's some other ones that, again, I don't want to get into because of spoilers, but I thought the supporting cast was really good. There were some very interesting characters, and I know at least one of those characters gets their own book later, which is partly why I chose to start here. Now, as I said, I really enjoyed this book, and I thought the pacing was mostly good, but one of the things that I would critique about the book is the pacing in the middle. It did start to feel like it was dragging a little bit because we were kind of just doing the same thing over and over again, where we'd see Hodges figure out like a tiny small piece of information, and then we'd go through a day in Brady's life. And while those were interesting things, it did feel like it started to drag a little bit in the middle of the book. And then, I mentioned this earlier, but there's just some decisions that specifically Hodges makes that I just felt made no sense at all. Like, you're just thinking, like, why are you... this doesn't make any sense. And some of them, as I said before, you can see where he's coming from. But then there are other decisions that are just so baffling that they're hard to reconcile. And, like most of these books, I'll say there's definitely some suspension of disbelief required. I think, getting away with driving into a crowd of people would probably be one of the hardest things to do. Not saying it's not possible, but that kind of premise, it does, I think there you have to suspend your disbelief there. And I knew this going in, but some people may not. If you're expecting, horror or supernatural elements, like I would say Stephen King is mostly known for, although I think a lot of people know him for his detective stuff now as well. But, that stuff is not here. The villain is psychotic and, like I said, a real Fruit Loop, but, it's not going to be like, something like It or anything like that. So that's just something to be aware of. Overall, I definitely enjoyed this book. It was like a good gritty crime detective thriller. It's not the best book I've ever read, but I did enjoy it. So I'm going to give this book a solid 7.6 out of 10. Again, I don't think it did anything overly, groundbreaking, but it was in my opinion, well-written, interesting read. Well, if you've made it this far, I certainly appreciate it. And I would really appreciate it if you can like and subscribe. Let me know what you thought about the book in the comments, and I hope to see you soon.